sit down though, ladies and gents, because you won't be happy with what I've got to tell you, because while we're pontificating about your council tax going up and what you're actually going to get back for it, well, it's been revealed today, and I think this is pretty damn shocking, really, the amount of money that's been handed over for so-called, I'd call them extras, to asylum seekers. Are you sitting comfortably? Because it's £141 million since 2022, and it covers things like PlayStations, DJ lessons, circus skill lessons, Tai Chi and yoga, and I could go on, but you get the gist. What do you think to this, Ben?
Well, I mean, the whole point about the illegal migration bill that Suella Braverman rightly championed, was that anyone who entered this country illegally had broken the law to get here and should be detained and deported. There was never a suggestion that they should be put up in four-star hotels and given PlayStations, interpreters, cash in their back pocket, free dental care, free medical care, and all the rest of it. And it is a complete breakdown, as I was saying in the last segment, a complete breakdown in frugality in central government, in local authorities, and a complete disconnect by those who govern and those who pay for the governance. And I think you're absolutely right, Michelle. I think those councillors think it's play money because there's no accountability. They don't have to answer to anyone. And as I said also in the last segment, many of these district councils, the 317 local authorities across the country, not district councils, local authorities, haven't even had an audit passed in the last five. Can you imagine? A private business would be struck off if it hadn't got itself audited. And these people are allowed to raise money, spend your money, and they can't pass an audit. It's an absolutely shocking state of affairs. And I tried to bang the drum on this, and Wellingborough is absolutely amazed to see how little anyone was fussed by it. If you don't know where your money is being spent because you haven't got audited accounts, you cannot hold anyone accountable, even if there were mechanisms to do so. Are you with me? Even the local MP couldn't do it.
Mathew Laza, I mean, what do you even say to this?
So, I have two things to say. First of all, to be fair to the councils, quite a lot of this money was given from central government specifically for these tasks. So they were effectively spending it on behalf of central government. So it didn't come from council taxpayers' money. Most of it, not all of it. I'd say to councils that spent... I'd say to Croydon, which gave 20 grand to Care for Calais, the controversial charity, to put it mildly, that operates in the migrant camps in Calais. They gave them a grant. That seems completely daft. And so, you know, I would make sure if I was in Bristol, where the Green Party's in charge and is threatening to only collect your black bin once a month, not once a week, not once a fortnight, once a month, I would want to see that none of local council taxpayers' money was being spent on taking refugees to rugby matches. So if it's central, I think if it's central government, then that's... I'm not saying that all the spending's right, but I'm saying that the anger should be with central government who are making them spend it.
But again, though, that's nonsensical, though, because there is no such thing, really, as central government funding. There is only our funding as taxpayers. And the more squeezed the central government pot is, to use your terminology, the less money will be flowing through to the spreadsheets titled local government. And the challenge that we have in this country is that a fundamental British value is that of fairness. And if I reach out into the surface of the people watching this and I get in your living room and I ask you, when was the last time you and your family went to football matches, had new games consoles, where you trek your kids to driving lessons, football matches and so on and so forth? People, tax-paying people, hard-working people that contribute into the pot, whatever pot that is, whether you call it central or local, they can't afford those things. So now, I actually worry about the direction.
Well, it's like people who are sleeping.
It's not fair.
Yeah, look,
this is not fair.
I agree with you that a lot of this spending seems completely daft. Of course, if people...
No, it's not just daft.
It's wrong.
It's more than just daft. I don't look at this and go, right, Bristol spent over £250,000 taking people to watch Bristol Rovers and Bristol City matches and say, I don't look at that and go, oh, that's a bit daft, ha-ha, on I go with my day. I look at that and I go, that's pretty damn disgraceful.
I think it's... Look, I mean, I don't understand why Denbighshire Council in Wales spent £550 to take new arrivals rivals on a stadium tour of Anfield across the border in England. It's not even a local activity.
What do you mean by new arrivals?
That's the quote. So I presume he means new refugees.
Illegal migrants.
Well,
people who have broken the law to come to our country.
I think that if people are granted asylum in this country and are going to stay in our country, then clearly you have to integrate them. So language lessons, it seems to me a common sense use of money if people have been granted permission to stay. Language lessons are a bit different from taking people to see Gloucester play rugby. So I think that, whether I agree with you, whether it comes out, all I was doing is defending the councils because some of them were literally doing what they're told by central government. The anger should be at the whole public sector if it's spending that much money on things that we don't think are right.
Final brief word to you.
Well, on the point of illegal migration, we've got to get a grip of ourselves. Anyone who enters this country must be detained, and by detained, I mean imprisoned. They should not be in hotels. They should not be the guests of our local councils. They should be in prison. That's it. And they should be deported. And if they can't be deported, they stay in prison. And that's it. I can't understand this mealy-mouthed, pathetic, wet approach to dealing with border enforcement and stop them in the channel.
Look, I don't know about you. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. All views welcome, of course. It just feels like there's a fundamental breakdown now in the social contract in this country. We're supposed to be a fair nation. If you go out and you work and you graft, you're supposed to be OK, you're supposed to do all right for yourself. You're not supposed to have your back pocket dipped into over and over and over and over again and to be squeezed to within an inch of your life to be providing all of these very nice to have additional things for people that haven't contributed to a system, whoever those people may be. You might, though, disagree. Get in touch and tell me. Well, look, let's talk, shall we, about what goes on over the pond. I've got to say, sometimes I'm a little bit jealous of them. I mean, we could sit here and we could talk all day long about some of the things that Donald Trump is doing, but now something that caught my eye is what many people are calling, quote, an extraordinary deal, this time with El Salvador, to accept deportees. They'll take migrants, apparently, of all different nationalities, as well as violent American criminals. I've got to say, many people get quite concerned, though, when they see some of El Salvador's prisons. They think they're inhumane or whatever. Others people say, actually, Donald Trump's doing the right thing.
So when you have a society that is settled and law and order at least is in equilibrium, it's not getting worse, then I think we can have light touch policing, we can have a more generous approach to the criminal justice system. But when the criminal justice ecosystem, as it were, is out of control and progressively heading in the wrong direction, then you have to use ever more draconian measures in order to try and control the beast. And what we have seen right across Western civilization over the last 3 or 4 years is an increasing breakdown in law and order, partly because of rampant illegal migration, partly because of all the ridiculous programs on which our money is spent, police not doing their job, criminal justice system being two-tiered because it's directed to being two-tiered through the diversity, equity and inclusion agenda. All of these things have come together to deeply damage our criminal justice system. And what Trump is now having to do, what we're seeing France trying to do, and what I fear we're having to do quite soon, is become ever more draconian in our responses in order to settle the country. And that is a direction in which we do not want to go. And what we've got to do is get to the root causes of all of this, which Trump, I think, is also doing by abolishing DEI, by getting illegal migration under control, by deporting those who came from Colombia, for example, and doing it with absolute force, requiring Colombia to take them back. Get your society settled, and then these draconian measures are not needed. And I hope we can find our way back to there. What we don't want to become is, we don't want to be in a doom loop where we're having to increasingly become more draconian because we're not mending our ways and we're not taking steps to settle society.
Sounds to me, Ben, it's a bit like Tony Blair's tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. We'll make a Blairite out of you yet. I mean, look, I think that this is... you can understand how popular this proposal is, that the US exports not just people who are from El Salvador, but criminals from all countries to the fairly brutal justice system in El Salvador, the sort of country that features in those, worst jail in the world sort of documentaries that we see from time to time. I actually think that there is a serious policy issue in here, here, which is the increasing number of foreign criminals that are stuck in British jails. So I think that one thing we do need to do is send more foreign criminals back so that they can serve their sentences at home and we get them off the British taxpayers bill. Well, because I don't think enough attention's been paid to it in the past, and I think sometimes we need to make sure the courts aren't putting blocks in the way. But we certainly need to do that because the percentage of the whole prison population who are foreign nationals has just kept going up and up. And there was actually, I think it was one of the Baltic states, I can't remember which one, that offered to have some spare prison capacity and offered to take prison capacity. I frankly am not against sending people. I wouldn't send them to El Salvador, but I'd certainly send them to Estonia. I think it was Estonia that offered to take them. And those would be people who, we don't want to be sending British prisoners there because there are things about how important family visits are, etc. But if there are people from third countries, why can't they serve their sentence in Estonia as much as they can serve it?
You might recall, Matt, Maloney had a deal with Albania. Like we had one with Rwanda, she had one with Albania. And the ECHR even interfered in the Albanian deal.
It still is. But Labour's not against processing asylum seekers offshore. It just didn't like Rwanda. But actually, Labour's secretly watching the Maloney deal and hoping it gets through and thinking maybe that's the future.
But hold on a second. I don't necessarily agree with what you just said. You're saying that they're basically not Labour Party, not against the principle of what the Rwanda deal was. They just don't like the country Rwanda.
It wasn't the country. There were two. So what Labour didn't like about the Rwanda system is that it was sending people to Rwanda who were going to be processed under Rwandan law. So what Maloney's doing is sending people to Albania, but they will be processed under Italian law in Albania. So they'll basically be on a video link with an Italian judge. And there's also there's talk of doing it in Tunisia. Other countries are thinking about doing it in Tunisia, and that's different because you remain under European law, our law, rather than going under Rwandan law. And that was the difference.
But do you think on reflection that actually, given the amount of time, energy and money that had been invested in the likes of Rwanda, that it was almost a situation where you might as well just see it through, see whether or not it's a deterrent, and then if it's not, immediately get rid, rather than getting rid before you'd even tried it?
I mean, I think there is certainly an argument for that. I mean, one argument is if you're in favour of a different sort of offshore processing, you needed to have that in place or be prepared to have a policy that did that before you said no to the Rwandan type of offshore processing. So, I mean, that's a legitimate stick with which the government can be hit.
I mean, what I would like to say, though, is, we've discussed various programmes that we've considered in this country to deal with illegal migration, none of which have worked. And we are doing precisely the opposite of President Trump. He's now taken a mallet to the problem, an absolute mallet, and he's getting it under control. We are still examining...
Let's wait and see if it works.
Well, it's working. Colombia, between the 6th hole and the 18th hole, he managed to convince Colombia to take a plane load of illegal migrants back. It's working. And I can tell you, being deported to El Salvador to serve your prison sentence is going to be one hell of a deterrent to those would-be criminals in the United States.
Ben, in terms of sending people home, there's been a significant increase in returns since Labour came to power, and it's a real thing they're concentrating on, which is people just got stuck in the system, and they should be sent home. So flights are leaving to various parts more than would ever have gone to Rwanda.
But the point I want to make, and the central point I want to make, is we are still examining our navels, unable to come up with the kinds of policies that we need to come up with in order to prevent people from being attracted to and able to enter this country illegally and then stay here once they're here. What we need is to grow up in this country and realise that it is not uncivilised to stop illegal migration. It is the only civilised thing to do, because your own society, for all the reasons I outlined at the beginning, will be assaulted. And when that happens, there's no option but to then become ever more draconian. So if we want to go back to the Bobby on the beat who doesn't carry a gun, isn't wearing body armour, isn't wearing a camera on his head, if we want to go back to that, we've got to settle society. At the moment, what I see on the streets, the few policemen I do see, they've all bodied armoured up. They all look like they're sort of about to go into war. Is that what we want in the United Kingdom? It's not what I want.
We've got to stop it. We've got to
We're
stop
becoming
the
uncivilized.
We've got to stop illegal migration. It's bad for British society, people arriving illegally, but it's also obviously tragic for the scores of people who die in the Channel on their way. And so it is clearly a problem that needs to be tackled. I don't think the government has yet got a grip on it. Obviously, we know the previous government hadn't either. But it is a problem that needs to be solved. The small boat arrivals cannot just become the new norm.
But it requires determined, robust response, not the lily-livered, lefty, open border, examine your own navel until you've been
I don't think there is
approach.
open borders. I mean, I actually think it needs a pan-European solution which involves people never reaching European shores, offshore processing in Albania and in Tunisia. But of course, if you do anything in cooperation with Europe, a certain side will come down like a ton of
Europe
bricks.
is incapable of enforcing borders, Matt. They've taken down their borders because they're ideologically wed to a Schengen
Well, the Germans,
zone.
for example, have now have withdrawn their objections to doing offshore processing. So I think offshore processing is what will happen.
We need
people
borders.
Never get here.
Member states of the European Union need to remember they should have borders. Don't give in to the Brussels nonsense. Put your borders back up.
Put your borders back up. I mean, it sounds simple, but obviously it's not that simple, or so many people would seem to think. But one man who does talk tough on all of that is, of course, Nigel Farage. Do you think he would make, then, the best Prime Minister to try and sort some of this out, or absolutely not? Your thoughts?